The Braver is an interesting class that uses both katanas and bows. Katanas allow you to traverse the battlefield incredibly fast and deal in quick, powerful, yet graceful swings, while the bow grants ranged burst damage, but it has some good up-close and personal skills too though. It should be noted, however, that one would usually go only katana or bow. If you want to go hybrid, you can still do all the content the game has to offer, just not as efficiently. Before moving on, let's talk about the unique skill that Braver has when it comes to using its mag. Basically, all the dex you put into your mag will convert to melee and ranged power. So if you were to use a pure 200 dex mag, you would then receive 200 melee and ranged damage as well. The only reason you would not use a dex mag is for very niche builds, or if you are playing other classes on the same character but only have one mag and don't expect to get any more. Next, let's get the stances out of the way because they're pretty simple. If you plan to stick to only one of the two weapons, you can take just about the entirety of both stances. If you go hybrid, you would usually stick to one stance and put the rest of the points into the bow skills. That being said, the stances Braver has are called Average Stance and Weak Stance. Average Stance is similar to Hunter's Fury Stance. It simply gives a passive damage bonus to melee, ranged, and even tech power. And then Weak Stance is a bit stronger than Average Stance, but this requires you to be hitting a weak spot or using the appropriate elemental weakness, or you won't be getting any damage bonus at all. Next, let's move on to what I think you should know about each weapon, starting with the katana. The first thing would be some of its weapon skills have a special charge-up mechanic that, when done properly, will perform a stronger, more complete version of the skill, and this is known as a perfect charge. You'll know it's a skill that can do this by the red ring that's quickly expanding and contracting around your character when you try to charge it. By releasing the weapon skill, as soon as the red ring gets as close to your character as possible, you will then perform a perfect charge. This takes some getting used to, as some skills' charges are actually slightly different timing than others. But once you get it down, you'll even be performing it in midair. The next thing you should know about is your katana focus gauge, and this fills as you land attacks. When at 2 bars full, your damage is increased by 5%, and 10% when you're at 3. If at any time you perfect block, which means blocking right before you get hit, you will also perform a counterattack. At this time, if you have 2 or less bars of focus, all of it will be consumed and will be used to augment the damage of that counterattack based on how full it was. If you had 3 or more bars full, you would do a maximum damage counter and gain a purple aura that buffs your damage and critical rate while slowly draining the focus gauge. And your goal will be to have it active as much as you possibly can. Next up is something also pretty interesting, and that's an active skill called Katana Combat that you should take on your skill tree. And this puts you into like a mini stance for up to 20 seconds. During that time, your normal attacks will turn into gap closers, and your attack speed will slightly increase. But wait, there's more. Within those 20 seconds, your goal is to get as many hits off as possible. And this is because at the end of Katana Combat, you can activate the skill again to do a final attack. And that final attack's damage will scale accordingly to how many hits you did during the Katana Combat duration. This caps out at 50 hits, and skills that do multiple hits will help it build up faster. And for 1 skill point on your skill tree, you can opt to be invulnerable during the whole duration of Katana Combat. And now let's move on to the bow. Some of the bow skills can be charged, and usually should be. There is one exception, however, and that's Banishing Arrow, and this is actually a very interesting weapon skill. This sticks an orb on an enemy, and half of the damage dealt to the enemy within 3 seconds will be done again in the form of an explosion. Charging the skill only increases its projectile speed and its explosion radius. I wanted to mention this skill because it is really a great skill, and it should be a staple of some of your damage rotations. But don't get too hung up on using it a lot until you get used to it, as revolving everything you do around it could be a fruitless labor sometimes. One more thing I'd like to mention about the bow is an active skill you can pick up on its skill tree, and this is called Rapid Shot. I'm not sure if the name is going to change, but it's the one right here all the way at the bottom of the list. This takes your normal attack and splits it into 3 smaller, faster shots, doing reduced damage each. There's also other skills down the line that help modify the damage to this. In general, this is a really great skill that just buffs your damage and your PP regen by a lot because you're attacking more often. And I think those are the most important things you should know about the bow. As far as mobility goes, you should always have a katana on you, and this is to perform the weapon skill Morning Mistreaver. And you'll be using this as your main method of transportation. And the cool thing about this is you can dodge, or better known as sidestep, out of the attack animation and just chain it back to back. And like most weapons, you can also sidestep attack cancel for more movement, and you can do that with either weapon too. And lastly, let's go over which subclasses would be best for Braver. In general, Hunter is a great pick because it has a lot of damage and defense that it brings to the table with its stances, its buffs, its automatic use of mate items, which are your heal items when at half health, and a skill that allows you to survive an otherwise lethal hit. And then there's Summoner, which allows you to have access to techs, and give lots of offensive stats and some great passive health regen. And it also gives you a small skill you can place on an enemy to do more damage to them. This is slightly more advanced, but it's worthwhile. And if you wanted to pick specifically Bow Braver, the Hunter and Summoner would still be a great subclass for the same reasons, but you could also use Ranger. And with that, I hope you have a better understanding of Braver. It goes without saying, this is not an advanced guide whatsoever. I simply outlined the fundamentals I think you should know if you are interested in the class. If you would like to know more about the Braver, check out some of the amazing written guides in the description. They break down everything about the class so well, including each skill. And for those who would like to understand how to build the Braver, check out the Braver skill video I made to go along with this video. And with that, everyone, take care.